everyone. I will try to, actually this is probably easier for you guys since now I don't have any slides to distract you, but my talk, I believe, is multidisciplinary simulation training. What's
Does it improve outcomes?
Okay, I do have the right talk, all right. So, it's going to be about this. So, half you guys in here, just look at this glass, okay? And this, my talk is all about the glass. It's half, did I fill it halfway? Is it halfway full or halfway empty, right? So that's the way I look at this. But how many of you went to the pre-conference? Sorry. How many of you went to the pre-conference? All right. Now, how many of you did the simulations in the pre-conference? Okay, so quite a few. Now, those of you that went to the pre-conference, when you go back to your hospital, do you think what you did in the pre-conference is going to change or impact what you do at the bedside? You say, Grace says yes. You guys, I see other nods. And do you think that's going to change what happens to patient outcomes? Grace says, I don't know. Right. So I would have thought most of you would have said the glass is half full, so you're an optimist, so the answer would be yes, right? But what's interesting is this is where I would start showing you publications. But when you look at the literature, it's interesting. So if the title was, does education impact outcomes, the answer would be yes. There's plenty of data out there, right? So there's data from about why do we give CMEs or why do we give continuing medical education credits, because the data shows if you attend these educational seminars, you do impact clinical outcomes at the bedside. So whether it's about glucose control, or whether it's about hypertension, breast screening, but there's a lot of data out there that says if doctors, nurses go to CME or continuing medical education type of courses, then yes, absolutely, there is evidence that shows it does impact patient care. But when you start to do the search about simulation, and especially ECMO simulation, it's really, really tough. So I'm sort of looking at this glass and saying it's half full. I'm an optimist. But so why do I say that? So when you remember that study, the NIH study, the famous NIH study, what was it, in the 70s that was published, and it pretty much eliminated adult ECMO because the study said adult ECMO does absolutely nothing. And the results were just as bad as those that went on conventional therapy. So the publication came out, and everyone said, oh, forget adult ECMO, we'll just do neonatal ECMO. Okay. When you read, there's many parts of that study that are interesting. Some of it is, when you look at the actual results, some of those patients were getting 1 to 2 liters of blood a day. And when you look at the pathology, all of the people that died had pathology that showed significant lung injury. So you're thinking, whoa, ECMO sounds like the same as conventional ventilation. But when you start to look at how they prepared this thing, there were 9 centers. So, Dr. Bartlett knows everything, right? So I asked Dr. Bartlett, what's with this? What did they do for education? And what's interesting is, out of the 9 centers, only 3 had ever done ECMO before. The rest of the 6 had never done ECMO. So you ask, well, Dr. Bartlett, did they train them? Did they have protocols? Did they prepare them? No, they rolled the machine in, said to the staff, okay, here it is, do ECMO. Now, this day and age, we would never want to do that, right? We work hard to educate our teams. We work hard to make sure that we know how to work together. So when I look at that study, I say, okay, ECMO simulation, that's what we do now, probably does impact clinical outcomes. But I still haven't convinced you because there's no evidence. So I'll get to that in a second. But so how did we get to this point on saying ECMO simulation or multidisciplinary sim training is important? Well, so we have to look at history. So you know, those of us that are doing quality, we all of us are in some way related to quality improvement in our hospitals now. So it goes back 20 years. And this was, of course, a North America thing. The Institute of Medicine in 1999 published a book. It was an eye-opening book. And when you read it, it's like, it was, to me, I skimmed it last night before my laptops crashed. They attributed 98,000 deaths per year from avoidable errors. Right? 98,000 people in the United States were dying every year because of avoidable medical errors. I say, okay, now we have EMR, it all gets better. But in fact, when you start to take that down and look at the causes, the book was very, very careful to say it's not the individual, it's not the competency of the individual, but it's the failure of the system. The system, there's no team, there's no training of team dynamics. The system doesn't support the multidisciplinary approach toward care at the bedside. There's no checks and balances. And that became the target of improvement based on an Institute of Medicine article. Now the airline industry was already on this, right? The airline industry is all about crew resource management. We call it sometimes crisis resource management, but they knew. They were already looking at checklists and team dynamics and communication between people. So the multidisciplinary approach really got its boost from back 20 years ago when we started to see that all of these deaths in the United States were due to communication and team dynamics. CRM became important, so we started looking at team competencies, communication between teams, how background impacts what we do at the bedside. So it's great, but how do you teach that? Right? It's definitely not me standing up here and talking to you guys. That's not the way to teach. We know ECMO, and all of us that do ECMO here, we know there's three big parts to it. One is, yeah, you gotta use your brains, the cognitive part. The other one is you gotta know how to use your hands. So your brain and your hands have to talk to each other. But the other big piece to effective ECMO care really is communication. Dr. Bartlett says it all the time. ECMO is a team sport. You have to know how to talk to each other. So the multidisciplinary simulation education incorporates all of those elements that we think are important to bring safe care to the bedside. And communication is a big piece because when things go bad, we don't do it by ourselves, it's a team. The nurses, perfusionists, whoever you have, biomedical engineers, whoever it is at the bedside, you all work together to improve care at the bedside. So at this point, I would say, all right, so I did a search. There are many publications. The first publication came out in early 2000 from CAPE, the Stanford Center, where Halamack published two publications about ECMO simulation. And he clearly showed, yes, it was realistic. Yes, the team loved it. Yes, it changed the task, the response times, the ability to do the task. So he showed many things were improved with simulation. Bishoy Zachary, who's the chair of education for ELSO, published a story in the adult ICU. I'm sure Natalie has published stories about articles about ECMO simulation or simulation. But if you look at what we're publishing as the metric, it's really about task completion, communication, comfort level of the caretaker, and sort of reaction times. So is that an outcome though? Right? So that's what I asked myself. Are those the right outcomes? So I said, yeah, I'm a simulation guy. Those are things that I would be happy about, but you have to really ask, going back to the Institute of Medicine article that talks about clinical outcomes. So clinical outcomes come down to a list. And I found that, most people say morbidity or survival, clinical stability, severity of principal diagnosis or comorbidities, complications, physical functional status, quality of life, patient satisfaction. Those were defined as clinical outcomes. And now, at this point, as far as I know, and there's a lot of sim people out there, I haven't seen a paper yet that really addresses whether multidisciplinary simulation training does truly impact clinical care. I look at that as half full. I'm the optimist. I have to believe that when the nurses feel more comfortable, the doctors are able to talk to the nurses much more effectively, the perfusionists, that has to improve. But we're not at the point where I can stand up here, show you a paper, Natalie may be submitting one in a few weeks, but I can't do that yet. So that's a challenge that we have for ELSO, and I'll go into that in a second. But when you look at the overall piece, you know, I always go back for the education and people in here. There's this guy named Miller, and he has this created this Miller's triangle, and it's about competency. There's 4 levels of competency, with the apex of the Miller's triangle being the ultimate level of competency, where the student is able to do the task in their own natural situation in a complex environment. At the very bottom, the base, is they know the knowledge. So it's like me talking to you guys. Next becomes they know how to use the knowledge. Next is they show how to use the knowledge. And that's probably where we are at simulation. We're not at the very top. We're at the next to the top where we're showing that we know how to use the simulation. But to impact clinical care comes down to the very top, where you're able to use that knowledge in your own environment, in a complex situation, and then apply it to the patient. So we're not there yet. So how are we going to get there? All of us are going to continue to do it, but one of the things that my plug for ELSO is that there's a group of 40 people, and we'll come together to really standardize what we do. You know, standardization, quality people. What's the most important thing? One of the most important things in quality, standard work. Everybody has to know what we're doing, and it improves outcomes. Again, glass half full. But, so what we're doing in ELSO is we have a particular research group. There's 6 or 7 members from all over the world. So all of the new standardized protocols that we have, all of the standards we have about courses, workshops, online, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that what we're teaching and the way we teach it is going to truly impact clinical outcomes at the bedside. So stay tuned. Hopefully we will see a difference. And that's it. Thank you.